Alright, we're back. Yeah, so I left early. I don't remember if it was yesterday or the day before, but I left early. And we are continuing it today. So I'm gonna restart the video that we were on yesterday. So we are going to continue this one because we didn't finish it yesterday. So I have updated the look of, so now let's do this.
Game series.
Book series.
Help wanted.
New book series.
Oh, come on. Fine. Phone guy.
Phone dude.
Purple guy.
Orange dude.
Didn't you just... Fine. Wild card. Change the category. Timeline.
Bite of 87.
Chum of 83.
Party of 85.
Wait, but...
Time traveling ball pit.
You can't just...
Reverse.
Oh, yeah? Reverse.
Reverse.
Reverse. Reverse. Reverse. Reverse. Reverse. Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory. Another day, another installment in the FNAF multimedia conglomerate. So, at this point, some people in the FNAF community really hate my guts. Like, bring me through a meat grinder and feed me to a rabid dog animatronic levels of hate. Like, for instance, this comment, and I'll read it exactly as written to stay true to his authorial intent. Quote, as a hard-care FNAF fan, he's a embracement to FNAF tourists. He insists on using the box to proof his stupid theories, and they don't even make sense. He souks and thinks he's smart, but he's not. I wish he would stoop. He then goes on to rant for a paragraph about how unrealistic time travel is in a franchise about robot rabbits haunted by ghost metal, but I think you get the point. And though I use this one really over-the-top extreme comment as an example, seeing stuff like this is a bummer, because I don't know if you can tell, but I really do like this franchise, and I see my role in it as a person just connecting ideas or presenting new threads to consider in a franchise that at this point is massive and really confusing. But his comment does bring up something that I should probably address at the top of this episode since it'll be relevant for today. My use of the, how did he put it? The box to proof my theories. Here's the thing, friends. I think this is something that both sides could use as a reminder. Both my FNAF theory followers and my FNAF theory haters. There is a difference between canonicity and continuity. And I think a lot of the times in these sorts of discussions, they get confused with each other. Something being listed as canon just means that it's official. It is blessed by the person who is overseeing the rules of the universe. It is self-consistent within the boundaries of that fictional world. On the other hand, a continuity, at least as I'm referring to it here, is a timeline of events. A continuous story thread where one event leads to the next that leads to the next. Take Star Wars as an example. Rey having magic healing powers in Rise of Skywalker, or Leia flying around like Mary Poppins in The Last Jedi. Because they're appearing in official works of the franchise, those powers thereby get the green light as being canonical powers of the Force in the overall Star Wars universe. The problems people have with them, though, is that they don't fit in cleanly with the continuity that was previously established. If Force healing is in fact a thing, then why hasn't it been used to save literally anyone before this point in the series? Tell you what, it would have been really handy for old Qui-Gon Jinn over there in Episode 1, but the fact remains, healing is now a canonical Force power, which means that the canonicity of certain powers is presenting challenges to the established continuity of events that came before. Now, this is where FNAF comes in. You see, you can have multiple continuities all existing under the same canon, and it appears as though this is how the FNAF franchise is working. The original novels and the original games exist in an alternate universe from one another. They are separate continuities, and yet they're all deemed canon. This was all expressly stated by Scott years ago. Quote, so yes, the book is canon, just as the games are. That doesn't mean that they are intended to fit together like two puzzle pieces. The book is a reimagining of the Five Nights at Freddy's story, and if you go into it with that mindset, I think you'll really enjoy it. Now, what I've been trying to do with my theories, and what I think some people on both sides misunderstand, is that I'm not trying to use the books to solve a continuity. I'm trying to use the books to establish a canon that will then allow us to solve a continuity. The books present present us with themes, concepts, characters, and motivations in one continuity that can then inform our understanding of a separate continuity. Or, at the very least, give us questions that we can ask of that continuity. Charlie, being a robot in the books, tells us that in the canon of the Five Nights world, passable humanoid robots can actually be a thing. So, are there any characters in the games who this may or may not apply to? I don't know, but it's a question that we owe it to ourselves to ask because it's been established to be canon within this franchise. Do we know what these little pins are on Baby's design here in the game? No idea. In fact, most people probably didn't even remember that they existed in the first place.
Switch
In the books,
zone.
they play an important role. These are the things that allow Baby to transform into a human disguise. Now, is that necessarily what they're doing?
I am good. How are
No,
you?
Definitely not. Is the best and likely only clue for what they really are coming from a separate continuity? Yeah, in this case, yes it is. This isn't us trying to shove puzzle pieces together like Scott warned us against. It's about seeing that in one puzzle, there's a piece that fits in a certain location, and in a separate puzzle, we have a similar piece that might end up acting in a similar way. And here's the thing, you don't have to take my word on any of this anymore. Scott recently made a new post about all of this to clarify the situation. In response to the question of whether the lore of FNAF is solvable, he said this: "All I can do is say that some questions will be answered, even if it may not always be the answer you wanted. Be patient." Let me at least say this: future games will look forward, but look to the novels to fill in some of the blanks to the past. So there you have it, from the creator himself. Does including the books in our discussions make things messy and complicated? Sure, but remember what franchise we're talking about here, friends. Messy and complicated is like the formal first name that Five Nights at Freddy's never uses. Call it McFNAF, messy, complicated Five Nights at Freddy's. The long and short of it is that when it comes to this franchise, we as theorists have always had to be discerning over what clues are helpful and which ones are just red herrings. This is no different now. Back when we only had the games, we did it with the number of Foxy Toes and Freddy buttons. Did a missing button mean it was a new animatronic? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Now, we just have to do it with time-traveling ball pits and sound illusion discs. And here's the last thing I'm gonna say on the issue, and hopefully it's the last time that I have to talk about it. At this point, where there's soon to be more books than there are games in this franchise, take a minute to wrap your head around that one. To dismiss the books entirely at this point is just short-sighted. And I'm not just saying that because we're referencing the new book, Fetch. Yeah, seriously, we're in it. From page, I read it on digital, so it's like page 250 out of 3,127. Quote, "Greg did tune back in, though, when Kimberly Bergstrom raised her hand. Well, sort of tuned back in. He heard her question, 'Is this just a theory?' She probably didn't actually say it that way. That was just my creative interpretation of that line. Look, Ma, I'm an inside joke hidden inside the second installment of a multi-volume scholastic book series. Made it. Anyway, meta discussion over. Let's talk about this new book and what it means for the franchise, shall we? Fazbear Frights number 2 Fetch was recently released, and it is, well, if I'm being honest, it feels much less connected to the series than the first one. Don't get me wrong, the stories are still really good, if not even darker than the original 3. I mean, one has a young girl outright being mauled to death and wrapped in a sheet while she lays there dying, so pretty intense stuff. But the connections to the main lore are definitely a bit shakier this time around. I mean, the first book, Into the Pit, featured cameo performances by Golden Bonnie, Baby, Funtime Freddy, the Missing Children's Choir, and more. This one, meanwhile, introduces us to a lot of new things. A smartphone-powered animatronic dog named Fetch, tiny free-roaming versions of Freddy Fazbear called Lonely Freddies. We do get some quality time with Plush Trap, but, you know, it's Plush Trap. It's like the D-stringer in the FNAF canon alongside the Bitty Babs and the Endoskeleton 2. Is that a hot take? Did I just offend the Plush Trap stands? I mean, the run barely squeaked into Ultimate Custom Night as is. I'm just saying here, guys. Anyway, let's walk through these 3 new horror stories and what they mean for the franchise, shall we? Story number 1.
Yeah, Matt Meadow, the beard is really weird.
Katie, Hattie, and Cyril live near Olympia, Washington. Greg feels compelled to explore an old abandoned Freddy's restaurant where he discovers Fetch, a fearsome animatronic dog with sharp teeth and an even sharper understanding of texting lingo. Quote, "How long has this place been empty?" Greg asked. "Fetch looks like he's older than my dad, but smartphones haven't been around that long." End quote. After getting scared out of the pizzeria, the dog goes on to fetch whatever Greg wants with increasingly disastrous results, killing a dog, ripping his uncle's finger off, and eventually retrieving a school crush in the worst way possible. It's actually a pretty simple story, but there are 2 big things to call out about it. First, it continues a theme that we're starting to see develop in these books. Kids are being drawn to these restaurants. It's never explained in the story, but Greg feels compelled to go to Freddy's by some unseen force. Quote from the book, "This might be what he'd felt in the field, what had called him here." And again, a bit later in that chapter, Greg was afraid he might not have gotten what he was there for, had he done what he was meant to do. And Greg is now the second character to have some sort of psychic connection to these restaurants. As I talked about in our last theory, Oswald from Into the Pit had the exact same thing, where he inexplicably found himself drawing horrific animatronic monsters without ever knowing about Freddy's to begin with. It's also worth noting that both are the first stories in their respective books. It'll be interesting to see whether this trend holds in future installments. The second important part of the story, though, is that it clearly establishes Freddy's as a place where technology is advanced far beyond where the rest of society is. As I read in that earlier quote, Fetch can connect to smart devices like cell phones despite being older than the kid's parents. The reason I call this out is that in theory crafting for this franchise, I've seen a lot of theorists use the more modern, sleeker designs of the Funtime animatronics to put them later in timelines. But it seems like this story is telling us that those sorts of details don't matter. Freddy's is and will always be fantastically ahead of the curve when it comes to technology, especially technology for kidnapping small children. There was a bit more in that story about random event generators and plants/machines being able to read our minds and summoning stuff to you via mental focus, but I can't quite think of how it's important to any of the actual overarching narratives for the franchise, so maybe it's a discussion for a mini theory at some point down the line, but for now, I'm just gonna skip it. Story number 2, we'll come back to in a minute, as that one has the most to discuss. Story number 3, out of stock. A new plush trap toy. The plush trap.
Oh, he looks so happy.
Chomping green rabbit is all the rage, selling out at stores across the nation. It also retails for $79.99. So Scott be making those fat stacks both IRL and in the book world for his killer merch. A boy named Oscar, fed up with never getting what he wants, shoplifts the last one that someone had supposedly returned for being defective. Quote, is it just me or do the teeth look wrong? Isaac pointed at straight, slightly yellow, human-looking teeth that were visible through Plush Trap's partly opened mouth. And what's with the eyes? He reached out and poked one of the cloudy green eyes. Ew. He whipped his hand back and flicked his finger. Squishy. End quote. After a few days of it doing nothing, the plush trap suddenly activates and terrorizes Oscar and his friends, chomping.
Why is it so big?
Just trying to bite them. Their only protection is that plush trap freezes in the light. Quote again. He was turning the box over and over in his hands, and there in bold letters was a critical detail. Walks in the dark, freezes in the light. A few hours and a comedic number of faulty flashlights later, the boys destroy the monster at last by luring it in front of an oncoming train. A few things to call out here in this story. First and most obviously, it explains Plush Trap's behavior in FNAF 4. He really is just a haunted toy that goes on a rampage and is stopped by the power of flashlights. So it's cool to make that lore connection with Plush Trap's original minigame. We also know, based on the story, that Plush Trap apparently has the ability to mimic voices. He has a speaker system built in under his fur and is able to mimic the voices of Oscar's mother and friends. Now, this is a really interesting detail because up until this point, the only voice mimics in the franchise have been the Funtime animatronics, with their built-in systems intended to lure children away from their parents so that they could be grabbed. This suggests the possibility that Plush Trap was either a prototype for those larger models testing out the voice mimicry software, or was himself a Funtime era animatronic. Whereas up until this point, all us theorists have classified him alongside the other nightmares from FNAF 4. But the last and most important thing to call out, though, is the fusion of human parts and animatronic parts. The story makes it very clear that the Plush Trap Oscar has both human eyes and teeth. Quote from the book. Raj turned to Oscar. You managed to steal us the only plush trap chaser that looks like a half-human hybrid. End quote. Now, this idea of a half-robot, half-human animatronic is a completely new concept for the series. But is it? You see, in FNAF 4, we had ourselves Nightmare, the black, transparent, spooky bear that, if you looked closely enough, had a human brain in its head as a part of its design. A detail that pretty much all of us dismissed. I mean, all of us glossed over Nightmare in general as just like the embodiment of death. The game's Grim Reaper as the crying child slowly flatlines in his hospital bed. Or, just a figment of the boy's haunted imagination. But with this context from Fazbear Fright, could Nightmare have actually been a real experiment? Was William Afton in his quest for immortality, or Henry in his quest for more lifelike robots, testing the human brain's ability to survive in and operate an animatronic animatronic body. This would make Nightmare the literal Frankenstein's monster for family entertainment dining. And even though I say that jokingly, it's also something that appears in the Curse of Dreadbear DLC for FNAF Help Wanted, where we actively program a brain and insert it into Dreadbear's head before Hand Unit tells us this.
Well done. It's time to introduce the creature to the kids for focus testing and troubleshooting.
We know, based on the original trilogy of books, that Afton was obsessed with recreating living metal just like those original haunted animatronics. I see Nightmare, Dreadbear, and this plush trap all as potential experiments looking to do exactly that. Lastly, we come to story number 2, Lonely Freddy. My personal favorite of the bunch. In this one, we have rebellious teen Alec looking to expose his goody two-shoes sister Hazel for the fraud that she really is. Alec, in this story, is actually a really tragic character. He's a teen who acts out because he's ignored by his parents. The main reason he's trying to bring down his sister is because she is always the one who gets the attention. The two of them inexplicably team up to torment their parents in the lead up to Hazel's birthday party at Freddy Fazbear's, with Alec planning on double-crossing her the day of the party. When the day arrives, Alec's plan backfires. It's revealed that Hazel is truly just that pure and good of a person. It's been Alec who's been the jerk, pushing everyone around him away, thinking himself as the victim when he was actually making himself into the victim. With the parents just trying to cater to his needs and Hazel just wanting a brother who liked her, Alec runs off, ashamed of his actions, and hides in the storage closet. Just as he starts to make a promise to change for the better, he meets with a short little lonely Freddy, free-roaming 2-foot doll made to entertain kids that are ignored or forgotten about at parties. But things are never quite what they seem in Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The cute little bear hypnotizes Alec and then body swaps with him, imprisoning Alec's consciousness inside the tiny bear body. Quote from that moment, there, sitting across the table from his sister and his parents, was Alec. It was the same rumpled t-shirt he'd thrown on that morning before the party, the same ripped jeans, the same unruly golden curls, his light green eyes. Hey, Alec said, the voice in his head quiet at first, but quickly it was screaming, hey, that's not me, that's not me! His eyes, his stolen green eyes and his stolen body gleamed at him. And then, fake Alec smiled. As Alec, trapped in the lonely Freddy, was carried away by a store employee, he saw fake Alec wink at him from the table before returning his attention to a smiling, happy family.
I've only read the story. Yeah, the Fazbear Frights books are extremely weird. Yeah. I don't know why they decided, like, Scott Cawthon decided to make it weird with, like, different stuff. I do think, like, the first two are good. I don't know what to think about it.
Dark, right? And Alec isn't alone. After he's puked out at one of the kids at the party, he's picked up and thrown in a dumpster, where he meets a couple new friends. One final quote. His fall was broken by dozens of plush bears that looked exactly like him. Dozens of discarded, lonely friends. Help! Alec thought he heard himself say. Pretty soon, it was every bear in the bin, their thin, muted screams for help swallowed by the metal and darkness that entombed them. Alec and his new friends, dozens of the lonely ones. Ah, what a great closing line for that story. It is so heartbreaking to see this misguided kid suddenly learn to love his family, only to have his
Undertale
redemption ripped away by these animatronics. It is so sad as a story. But here's the thing, for as sad as it is, this story carries over yet another recurring theme that we're seeing develop in these books, that animatronics are stealing the identities of kids. In the first book, we have the story To Be Beautiful, where Baby steals the looks and identity of a girl named Eleanor. Here, we have ourselves another
Wait,
book
what?
that steals the looks and identity of a girl named Eleanor.
No, Eleanor steals the looks of... I forgot her name. I don't remember her name.
Here, we have ourselves another robot AI, this one housed inside the Lonely Freddy module, stealing the body of Alec. This, to me, is right in alignment with what we've been expecting from Vanny in the new FNAF game that's slated for release later this year. Remember, in FNAF VR, we hear the story of Jeremy, and how he cuts off his own face in an attempt to reject the system taking control of his brain. And when we beat that game, it ends with...
I mean... How long have I been sitting here? Like, I've been watching these videos for a long time. Here, let me check. So the first video was 2 hours and 11 minutes. The second one was 2 hours and 30 minutes. This third one was 2 hours and 1 minute. 1 hour 57 minutes, 42 minutes. Let me pull out my calculator, and then we'll see how long I've been sitting here for right now. Yeah, I think it's really weird how violent they can get, but I think it's, I don't know. 232, 16, 17. I've been sitting... Okay, so I've been watching 9 hours, 54 minutes, and 63 seconds of game theory videos. And that's not counting 22 minutes and 30 seconds that we've been here. I've watched 9 hours of game theory videos. Almost 10 hours of game theory videos. Yes, I am dedicated.
One person getting taken over in one game instead appears to be happening to kids in pizzerias everywhere. It's further evidence supporting this theory that I did on FNAF VR, where the story from this point forward is basically Afton creating an army, a cult, a bunch of brainwashed, or more accurately, body-swapped people hiding in plain sight, taking over bodies one by one. Kinda makes you wonder what FNAF 2020's got up its sleeve, right? But before we look forward, we actually have to look back. You see, there's one last topic I'd like to explore with this final story, and it's a doozy. It's the parallels that this story has with FNAF 4. In fact, I believe that the Lonely Freddy story is helping us to solve what is one of the longest-standing mysteries in this franchise, and also one of the strangest inclusions that we've never really had a solid answer for to begin with. And that, my friends, is the true story of Psychic Friend Fredbear. He's
here, he's there, he's everywhere. Who are you gonna call? Psychic Friend Fredbear.
But in order to tell you why, I need a bit more time. So until then, my friends, there's only one last thing to say. Do you want to save money on pizza? Yeah, that's right. All this Freddy talk has gotten me hungry for a nice old slice of pizza. Luckily, restaurants have...
Okay, I have to say, pizza is the best food ever. It's the one food I never get tired of. Yes. He only gets to sit down with floors. Look at this. The next one is the video with the full Fredbear song. Okay. I need to get ready for this. Why is it? Is that Japanese? What is it? I don't know that language. Buddy, when there is a jerk, he's a pal. When your dad is off at work, in the view, you gotta tonight until the sixth night. He's here, he's there, he's everywhere. Who you gonna call? Psychic Friend Fredbear. It's a flower for reasons still unknown. He loves you on your way home. And promise. On the floor. Seriously, Scott, what is that line for?
And is it supposed to be in a slightly different yellow font here? Are you meaning this to be figurative or literal? Because if it's literal, you are opening up a literal can of worms.
Here, he's there, he's everywhere. Who we gonna call? Psychic Friend Fredbear. Here, he's there, he's everywhere. Who we gonna call? Psychic Friend Fredbear.
start off today with a disclaimer. Warning, in entering this video, and honestly all of my theories, you are entering a zone of speculation, where any idea is valid for consideration in the hopes that it solves more problems than it creates, answers more questions than it raises, or ties together dangling pieces of evidence in a narratively satisfying way. Am I trying to solve the lore at all? Absolutely yes. Side effects of entering the theory zone may include a blown mind, total and utter confusion, a deeper appreciation of your favorite franchises, fun stories to share with friends, a head full of random factoids that will at no point aid you in life, and disillusionment about human existence and our own place in the universe. Enter at your own risk. Disclaimers aside, theory crafting is a tricky needle to thread. A good theory is one that has enough evidence to support it, but not so much evidence that it's basically a known fact. It requires extrapolation, thinking beyond just the stuff that we're given, but not so far past that you're overreaching or making baseless claims.
Sand!
That while still maintaining a satisfying story. A story that stays true to the franchise that you're talking about while not being afraid to take that known story in new, often riskier directions. In a lot of ways, theory crafting is like writing fan fiction, just, you know, with more evidence and less aggressive cuddling. A lot less aggressive cuddling than some of the fan fictions I've been exposed to over the years. Anyway, the reason that I say all of
That's
this
not
right now
creepy
is
at
that
all.
base theory is, how do I put it? It's one of the stretchier ones. Like, there are some theories that are rock solid. There's some really strong evidence in the game, and it's supported by stuff that's been said by the developers or creators. Then there are others that require a bit more creative license, where the connections are there, but they might require you to squint a little bit, or just, you know, have fun with it and go along for the ride. And this episode is one of those theories, because today we're once again diving into the world of Fetch, Book 2 of the Fazbear Fright series. You see, last time I mentioned this. Fetch was recently released, and it is, well, if I'm being honest, it feels much less connected to the series than the first one. The connections to the main lore are definitely a bit shakier. This one, meanwhile, introduces us to a lot of new things. A smartphone-powered animatronic dog named Fetch. Tiny, free-roaming versions of Freddy Fazbear called Lonely Freddy. And that felt weird to me. Every story of the first book felt very connected to established characters, from golden bunny suits to shape-shifting baby to Funtime Freddy. So why was this one, the second book, doing so many new things? It felt like a pretty extreme tonal shift, especially considering Scott had just posted about how these books would fill in some of the blanks from the past. So then I thought about it, and I considered what blanks from the past this odd collection of stories might be trying to fill. Something clicked. I think that there's a chance that one of the new inclusions in this book is actually something that we've known about for a long time. An oddball character that's confused us and stymied our theories for years. I believe that there's a chance that Fetch's Lonely Freddy's may actually be the real identity of FNAF 4's psychic friend Fredbear. You remember that plush doll from FNAF 4 with the living eyes that tracked your movements as you walked around the room, that stalked you in the streets and disguised itself as a flower? The thing that could actually read the crying child's innermost thoughts. I think that guy was a type of Lonely Freddy doll. But to truly understand why I think these two are connected, let's begin with Lonely Freddy's story. To quickly recap the story in a bit more detail than I did last time, because now the details actually matter for the theory, Alec is an angry teenager who's upset that his younger sister Hazel gets all of their parents' love and affection because she's practically perfect in every way. So when Hazel, just out of the blue, starts being overly nice to Alec and wants to join him in making their parents miserable, he doesn't trust her. He suspects that she's up to something, and so he concocts a plan to expose her for being a spoiled brat at her upcoming birthday party, which happens at, wouldn't you know it, the local Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. His plan, well, it's not a particularly good one, and if I have to fault this story for one thing, it's that the mechanics of how it all works is kind of confusing. So stay with me here. At Freddy's, they have this big money booth. You know, those clear boxes with fans that blow all these tickets around you. You try to grab them, and you walk away with whatever you're able to capture in the booth. And in the booth, there's a special ticket that allows you to win the top prize in the restaurant. A Yarg Foxy. Basically a large Foxy doll with extra hook-swinging action. Okay, so it seems like Hazel really wants to win the Yarg Foxy, so Alex sabotages her chances by taking out the special winning ticket before she gets in. Except she does win. By some weird, magical, unexplained miracle, the ticket winds up in her hair and she wins the Foxy doll. The twist, though, is that she didn't want to win it for herself. She wanted to win it for Alex. You see, Alex secretly loves Freddy's Pizzeria, but he never gets to have his birthday there. And of all the characters, he loves Foxy the most, even pretending to be Yarg Foxy around the house when no one's looking. But when Hazel tries to give it to him as a sign of friendship, as a way to try and finally make him happy, all it does is infuriate him. Once more bested by his perfect sister, Alec loses it, he rips the Foxy doll and runs off to the storage room crying. Once
Yeah,
again,
your
it's a
Foxy
lonely
would be
Freddy,
really
a
fun.
small, free-roaming version of everyone's favorite bear. The bear hypnotizes him and then body swaps with him, leaving Alec's consciousness trapped forever in the doll's body, while an AI with his face roams free, unbeknownst to his family. So forgive me the detailed plot description, but I needed to get all that in because Alec's story, strangely enough, closely matches what we see happening in FNAF 4's Crying Child. Now, I don't think Alec is the crying child by any means. There are just way too many differences here. But I did want to call out how similar these two stories are because the parallels seem intentional. They seem to be inviting us to compare these two stories. So let's do exactly that. Just like in FNAF 4, there's a countdown to a birthday party happening at Freddy's at the end of the week. Though in this case, it's a sister's party and not his. Speaking of the sister, Alec's younger sister Hazel is described as being cute and perfect, with a lot of emphasis being placed on her green eyes and her curly yellow hair. An important physical description considering Elizabeth, the girl who would go on to possess Baby and who we assume is Crying Child's sister and owner of this room in FNAF 4, is also blonde with green eyes. In fact, eye color is brought up a lot, an unusual amount throughout the Lonely Freddy story. Quotes like this: Alec had never noticed the bear's eyes before. Had they always been that blue? And again, its eyes were as blue and deep as an ocean trench. Over 13 times are eyes in this story qualified by their color, which is worth noting considering that a lot of the other short stories thus far in Fazbear Frights have had themselves pretty sparse character descriptions. But this one, for some reason, really chooses to emphasize the fact that Alec and Hazel have green eyes and that Lonely Freddy has blue eyes, which, if you have an obsessive level of knowledge of the series, should ring a few alarm bells. In Sister Location, eye color was a
Hello, Vicky.
so much so that I did a whole theory about it back when Sister Location came out, where the baby animatronic had blue eyes until she scooped Elizabeth and her eyes turned green. And here we have something very similar happening. Quote from the story: Alex stared hard into the blue eyes of Lonely Freddy, eyes that had burned through his soul. And he searched for answers of his own, but he only came away with more questions, because the blue eyes of the bear had suddenly turned a light green. End quote. And again, in this quote, all Alec could see was the bear as its newly green eyes bore through him. So we've got a party, a sister, and some eyes. But obviously there's gotta be more, right? Alec, when his plan fails, runs off to hide in the storage room crying, similar to the crying child being locked in the storage room in FNAF 4. And in general, Alec is just a sulky, moody kid who, similar to our crying child, both loves and hates Freddy Fazbear's. Alec, in the book, secretly loves the restaurant and its characters, but he also hates it because he only gets to go when it's for his sister, which makes him bitter and angry to be there. It's a lot like the conflicted feelings our crying child has for the restaurants, who clearly likes the franchise. I mean, he has all the toys in his room, and yet while he's there, he's clearly miserable. We're not exactly sure why, but he does have mixed feelings about this franchise. Kind of like me, that is hashtag relatable. I feel seen, crying child. But to me, one of the most telling connections between this story and the game is the Yarg Foxy toy. When Hazel tries to give the toy to Alec, Alec freaks out and rips the toy's arm off. It's a small detail, but one that immediately made me think of the Foxy that's in the Crying Child's FNAF 4 room. A Foxy plush with one very specific feature. A feature that has never gotten explained. Its head was pulled off. So we have ourselves two Foxy plushies, both with a body part ripped off in some way, in the possession of a kid who both loves and hates Freddy's, that winds up locked in a storage room.
Freddy Fazbear is my favorite.
Has themselves a green-eyed
I really like
sister
Fun Time
with
Freddy.
It is just an oddly specific series of parallels that are almost so precise, they're inviting us to compare them. It's actually a bit uncanny. Alec in this story is almost like a fusion of the crying child and his brother. You see, crying child for all the reasons that we just talked about, but also the older brother because, well, he's a mean older brother to his sister, and his favorite character is Foxy, so much so that he pretends to be Foxy around around the house, just like we see the older brother doing to torment the crying child in FNAF 4. Again, it's not exactly the same. There are plenty of differences between these two scenarios, but there are a lot of parallel details, almost like alternate universe versions of roughly the same series of events. So what does any of this have to do with Psychic Friend Fredbear? Well, I believe that all of these parallels with FNAF 4 are intentional. They're drawing lines between the two stories, inviting us to compare them. And when you do that, it becomes undeniable that Psychic Friend Fredbear is a Lonely Freddy. To understand why, let's start with the book. This is how Lonely Freddy is first described. Quote, "It was a weird name for a toy, but the weirdest parts of it were harder to define. The bear stood stiff, almost at attention. Its eyes stared straight ahead at the stage, but Alec had the strangest feeling that it was still watching him." End quote. So a small Freddy toy with eyes that watch you as you move around the room. Definitely sounds like what Psychic Friend does as we maneuver our way through the FNAF 4 minigames. His white eyes just move around with us wherever we go. We're also told that the Lonely Freddy is able to free roam in order to follow the kids around. Again, explaining why he shows up in practically every screen of the FNAF 4 minigames. It is literally designed to be a moving surveillance camera. I mean, maybe it can't disguise itself as a flower or whatever, but just chalk that one up to Scott's artistic license. Later in the story, we're told what the purpose of the Lonely Freddy is. Quote again, "At Freddy Fazbear's, we believe that no child should have to experience the wonder and delight of Freddy Fazbear's Family Pizzeria alone. Using patented technology and a touch of that Freddy Fazbear magic, Freddy will learn all about your child's favorite things just like a true..."
Yeah, I agree. The pirate outfit is better.
Just me, or does Lonely Freddy sound like the cure for the unwanted kid? It's a mechanical last resort, as in no one wants to play with this kid, so here's a machine that'll do it instead. End quote. This is a device specifically designed to become a friend to sad and lonely children. Children just like FNAF 4's crying child. Children just like Alec. And in a line, again drawing parallels between the two stories, we get ourselves this. Quote, "If there was ever a kid who would have been foisted onto a Lonely Freddy at a birthday party, it would have been Alec." Now, this is important. One of the strangest things about Psychic Friend Fredbear in the game was his knowledge of crying child's innermost thoughts, saying things like, "Remember what you saw," and "he hates you." It's the whole reason I started calling him Psychic Friend Fredbear in the first place. The toy's knowledge of what was going on inside the boy's head was just uncanny. Just one of the many strange things about this character. One of the many strange things about this character that gets an explanation via Lonely Freddy's behavior in the story. The bear approaches Alec in the storage room and starts asking questions. Questions that start to turn serious. Quote from the book, "I've been waiting for you, friend," the bear said. "We should be best friends." "It's a stuffed animal," Alec told himself. "It's a stuffed toy." "What's your favorite color?" "My favorite color is green." "What's your favorite food?" "Lasagna." Then the bear's questions took a different turn. "What would you do if you were asked to hurt someone you love?" It felt like the bear was reaching its soft, plush paw into his very soul and extracting the answer it was doing it so effortlessly. So the Lonely Freddy is a stuffed bear designed to act as a surveillance camera on kids. Follow them around, talk to the sad, lonely ones, and then extract information from them to become their friend before eventually body swapping with them. I mean, each and every one of those details, minus the whole body swap thing, is something that we see the Psychic Friend Fredbear do. But there is one last detail that I haven't included yet. The Freddys are controlled by a man who works in a private backroom office. Quote again, "The party prepper turned a dial on her hip-clipped walkie-talkie and pressed her finger to her headset. Someone get Daryl to do a Lonely Freddy demo." "Daryl's on break." The fact that there's someone behind the scenes controlling these devices in the book is a direct callback to the secret private room from Sister Location. The one where there were surveillance cameras watching the FNAF 4 house, guarded by the password 1983. It was in that room that we saw a Psychic Friend Fredbear for the first and only time in a non-8-bit setting. There, on the desk, was a short little plushie with his white little surveillance eyes and a walkie-talkie right next to him, coinciding with...
I wish Fredbear plushies like that were real. It looks so soft and cute.
This scene from the book. So there you have it, friends. The official name of Psychic Friend Fredbear is Lonely Freddy. It's not quite as fun, but I guess it's easier for me to type, so that's a plus. It's a camera system controlled by someone hidden in a back surveillance room. A system that has the ability to walk and talk and maybe even hypnotize and body swap. Now,
what's your favorite idea?
the question that we're left with is,
Hello,
who's
Landon.
controlling it in FNAF 4? I mean, it seems like the obvious answer here should be William Afton, right? Who else would be doing it? But the bigger question is why? Why would he be doing all this just to watch what we assume is his own son? And then over in Bookland, the question is whether all of this is intentional. It seems like the employees don't actually know the true nature of these robots. So is this an AI roaming around, or was a normal Lonely Freddy swapped out?
Yeah, they should have made a Fredbear
That
too.
one seems like the most likely scenario, considering in story number 3, out of stock, the plush trap chaser is swapped with an evil one with human body parts. So maybe William Afton, or some of his people in this book universe, are slowly seeding out evil animatronics into the world to run as little test cases. Also, since I'm wrapping up my discussion of Fetch here, something else for you to chew on. At Hazel's birthday party, there's a girl named Charlotte. A girl who shares a name with the child that we know goes on to possess the puppet. A girl who, in this story, is allergic to chocolate. Accidentally eats some and then spends the rest of the party vomiting. Could this actually give us an explanation for why Charlotte in the games would end up outside of the party, outside of the restaurant, when we see her in FNAF 6, before she eventually gets killed and turned into a puppet? It may be. It's just a thought that I'm throwing out there into the universe for everyone to pick apart. But with Fetch out of the way, it's time to look ahead. Because based on the descriptions, it's books number 4 and 5 coming out later this year that seem like they may hold the biggest lore reveals yet. In book 4's description, we see that one of the main characters will have the name Susie. If she also has herself a dog, Susie is almost guaranteed to be confirmed as our Fruity Maze girl, and our first ever victim, the one who goes on to possess Chica. We also know that one of the book 4 stories will be about Pete and his younger brother who, quote, get in a fight in the wake of their parents' divorce and fall prey to a gruesome curse. Two brothers with divorced parents that have some blood curse on their family? Seems like it could be another stand-in for our crying child and Foxy bro getting wrapped up in the cycle of serial killing their father started decades prior. And then, flipping over to book number 5's description, quote, in room 1280 of Heracles Hospital, something evil is keeping a man alive. A man with gruesome burns all over his body and an iron will to live. Sounds a lot like our good old buddy William. Or it could be the aftermath of the FNAF 6's restaurant burning. With that being the last book in the Fazbear Fright series, I'd expect that one to tie up a lot of different loose ends. Speaking of loose ends, by the way, hate them. That is why this show exists. To get rid of narrative loose ends, to tie them up, put them neatly and organized back on the shelf. So you know what I really appreciate? What doesn't have loose ends? Wireless earbuds, no wire.
I like earbuds. Alright, next one. If I had a dime for every time MatPat made a thumbnail with Golden Freddy coming out of the grave, I would have 2 dimes. Which isn't a lot, but it's weird how it happened twice. Where'd it go? Over there.
Let me come home with you. Is there room for one more? Can I come home with you? Let me come home with you. There's room for one more.
Okay. I bet that was MatPat, like, putting his face in a pillow and then just going, "Roar!"
Hello, Internet. Welcome to Book Theory. Because if you have one moderately popular indie Smash game in your franchise, chances are you also have yourself a 10-installment book deal. That's barely an exaggeration. Bendy and the Ink Machine, 3, with more promised on the way. Hello Neighbor, 6. Heck, it's a surprise that Baldi's Basics doesn't have an entire trilogy dedicated to the horrific backstory of the Jump Rope Girl.
I would read that.
No joke, at this point in my life, I'm reading more video games than I'm playing. But of course, today we're not talking about any of those other franchises. We're talking about the Grandpappy, the one that paved the way for all those who would dare to follow in its footsteps. 5 Nights at Freddy's and its 8 books, as well as its 2 graphic novel reimaginings of the first 2 books. But here's the best part, your friends. True to this franchise, the books were supposed to end at Fazbear Frights number 5. We're currently at Fazbear Frights number 3. The end was in sight. That was gonna be it. That was the end of the line. Mystery over. But oh no, my friends, of course not. Now there are 2 more final installments announced, just like every game after. joke that the fan was the scariest part of this franchise? Oh no, not anymore, dear theorists. Now it's multi-platform merchandising. So Fazbear Frights number 3, titled 1:35 a.m. just came out, and whoo boy, there is a lot to talk about with this one. If you'll remember, Scott has made it pretty darn clear that this new book series is meant to help us solve the mysteries from the past, and that the stories are, as they say in every book's official description, told from all different corners of the FNAF lore. But unlike the past 2 Fazbear Frights books, where the connections have been a bit looser, I suppose is the best way to describe a time-traveling ball pit that leads to a scene of some 1985 pizzeria murders, the stories contained in this one, in 1:35 a.m., all feel very strongly connected to, well, like I just said, every corner of the FNAF canon. The stories here are starting to show how they're connected to not only each other, but also how they're connected to the original book trilogy, and yes, how they're even connected to the games, creating this elaborate web of complicated animatronic death. But more than anything else, these books are starting to confirm things for us. Theories and suspicions that we've had for the better part of the last 5 years, which, you know, is kinda nice to receive some level of validation. Like I said, it is a lot to cover, and so I'm gonna cover this one like I've covered the last 2 books. Today's episode is gonna be dedicated to a general overview of the stories, spotlighting some of the most important details for theory crafting, and explaining what I think this new batch of stories is trying to tell us about the series' mysteries. And then the next video, we're gonna be doing a deep dive into probably the biggest mystery of all 3 books so far, FNAF's newest killer animatronic, the Stitch Wraith. This guy is actually really interesting, and his story is starting to weave through most of the 9 other small stories that we've covered in these other books, and what he means might actually have some severe implications for not just the original trilogy of novels, but also the future of the games. Like I said, more on that next week, but for today, let's start with our title story, 1:35 a.m. This one is pretty straightforward. Delilah is a young woman with a tragic backstory. Her parents both died when she was 11, at which point she was bounced around and abused, sadly, in the foster care system for years. Eventually, she finds a stable home and happiness with a man named Richard. They get married, and Delilah excitedly looks forward to finally having a child of her own so she can finally complete the family that she never had. Everything is going great in her life until Richard divorces her. Now she's alone and sadder than ever. And then she dies, trapped in a ventilation shaft after being tortured by the embodiment of the child that she never had. Children's entertainment, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so I may have seen...
They actually have FNAF books, like these Fazbear Fright books, at book fairs at school, like elementary schools, and I just think that's really funny. Imagine someone, imagine a 8-year-old child walking over to, oh look, it's FNAF, it's Fazbear Frights number 5. Bunny Call. Ooh, I can't wait to read this. And then later, he makes it into In the Flesh. And then he reads that part, and then just imagine that.
Skipped a few steps there, but it's roughly the idea. One day, Delilah finds an animatronic doll named Ella at a garage sale. A doll that reminds her of the child that she always dreamed of having. Quote, with brown curly hair, big dark eyes, and plump pink cheeks, the doll looked almost exactly like the baby Delilah had envisioned having someday with Richard. She'd been sure that she was going to be a mother, so sure that she'd named the baby before the baby was even conceived. Her name would be Emma. Delilah reached for the tag that hung on the doll's wrist. My name is Ella. Ella, so close to Emma. Delilah felt an odd tingle slither through her body. She buys the doll, in part because it reminds her of her almost never child, and because it has a built-in alarm clock.
Nice.
Starring with a side of functionality, just the way I like it. Anyway, she sets the alarm inside of Ella for 1:35 p.m. to help wake her up for her shift at work, but the alarm doesn't go off. Just like that, Delilah gets her first taste of parental disappointment. So she does what any good parent would do in that situation, immediately hurls her would-be child into the nearest dumpster. Yikes, Delilah. Maybe it's better that you and Richard didn't have that kid after all. Anyway, that night she's awoken at 1:35 a.m. by Ella. Delilah assumes that she accidentally set the alarm for a.m. rather than p.m., which reminds me of the time I didn't bother to set the clock right on my Tamagotchi and was forced to scoop his poop every day at 4 in the morning. I can't imagine why he died. Certainly not my fault. Anyway, she tries to find the trashed Ella doll, but can't. And from that point forward is slowly driven insane by the doll waking her up every morning at
Yeah, it
1:35.
really is.
I mean, 1:35 is still early enough at night to get a decent night's sleep. It's not a 3 a.m. challenge or anything like that, but whatever. Yeah, knowing that she'll never feel safe again, she climbs into a ventilation shaft in a building under construction and dies. Quote from the book, "She
That's
never
a good
wanted
idea.
things, she wanted love." Oof, it is a heartbreaker, man. The stories in these books so far have been pretty sad, but this one is just tragic. In fact, all 3 stories from this particular book are just rough. Now, this story has 2 really important details in it. Details that seem to make Delilah's horrific struggle a strange nexus point for both the original book canon as well as the game.
Bro, it's a canon event.
So let's start with the books first.
I don't know
At
why that's
1:35
what it
a.m.,
reminded
the
me of.
Ella doll is described as a, quote, helper doll manufactured by Fazbear Entertainment. Continuing forward with that quote, the booklet had a list of what Ella was designed for. She could keep time and serve as an alarm clock, manage appointments, keep track of lists, take photos, read stories, sing songs, and even serve drinks. Serve drinks? Delilah shook her head. Now, in the games, we never really get to learn much about Henry, the creator of the animatronics, but in the novel trilogy, Silver Eyes, Twisted Ones, and Fourth Closet, we get to meet not only his daughter Charlie, but also some of his other creations, including, wouldn't you know it, a doll named Ella, who is built to serve tea. From the Silver Eyes novel, quote, out sailed Ella on her track, a child-sized doll bearing a teacup and saucer in her tiny hands like an offering, end quote. Now, across all 3 novels, we never get a solid physical description of the Ella doll. But in another book, The Freddy Files, which collects all the main information about the franchise, we do get to see our first illustration of the doll. And wouldn't you know it, everything matches the description of Delilah's little garage sale find from 1:35 a.m. Quote again, wearing a puffy-sleeved 1980s era bright blue full-skirted dress with pink ruffled trim and a big bow around the waist, end quote. It's the same doll, meaning that this first story is happening in the novel timeline after the events of Fourth Closet. Somehow, this is the doll that Henry created for his daughter Charlie, who, I need to technically remind you, is his daughter, because again, remember, his daughter died at a young age, and he replaced her with a series of 4 robots that represent Charlie growing up at various ages, so Ella technically is an early version of his own daughter. Figured I'd throw that little factoid in there, since, this is a real and totally valid plot point from the novelized series of events in this very easy-to-understand series. But that's not all. While I was reading this story, the way Delilah decides to hide in the ventilation shaft felt really strange to me. Like, why? It was super random, but also was one of those things that felt so oddly specific that it felt like it had to have had a bigger purpose. So I dug around and found this for you. For your consideration, I present to you Night 2 of Sister Location.
So, funny story. A dead body was found in this vent once. Okay, so not that funny, but it's a story.
So, could Delilah be that body that was actually found in the vents of Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rentals? Maybe, but probably more likely it's alluding to that story from Sister Location rather than directly the same one. You see, in the book, we're told that Delilah's vent is in a site that's under construction, a 3-story structure that feels a bit like an office building. Sister Location, meanwhile, takes place in an underground facility underneath a residential home, so it's probably not the same building. At the same time, though, the story makes it clear that Delilah was drawn to this place. Quote, the answer to her plight was in here. She was sure of it. Someplace here, she was gonna find a way to escape Ella forever. And time and again throughout all of these Fazbear Fright stories, we're shown
Dun dun dun.
the Freddy Fazbear locations through some supernatural force. So could Delilah, or whoever died in the vents of Sister Location, have been compelled to come there? And this story is just giving us a hint as to how that happened. Maybe. And whereas the Delilah Sister Location connection might just be me reading too far into things, that certainly isn't true for our second story, Room for One More. In this story, and stop me if any of this sounds familiar, Stanley is a night guard at a mysterious underground facility full of little ballerina dolls looking to escape to the surface. Ding, ding, ding! It's like in one sentence we just won FNAF bingo. Each night he falls asleep on the job, wakes up to find a mini Rena doll on the desk asking to go home with him. Stanley falls asleep again, and when he wakes up, the doll is magically gone. Over the next few days, his arms start to swell, his throat starts to bleed, and yet he keeps going to work, keeps finding dolls, and keeps falling asleep. Eventually, he learns that the dolls have been crawling into his mouth while he sleeps, causing his body to swell to the point of bursting. The end. The moral of this story, kiddos, be a good employee. Don't sleep on the job. Otherwise, little animatronic creatures are going to crawl into you and make you explode from the inside out. What's also interesting about this story is Stanley's dreams. Each time he sleeps while on duty, he has himself a strange dream. In the first, Funtime Foxy is a cab driver. In the second, the facility's power cuts off and he comes face to face with Funtime Freddy. And in the last one, Ennard is a dentist and Ballora is his dental assistant, which I would say is one of the strangest things to ever appear in this franchise, but then again, I turn your attention to this corner where we have time-traveling ball pit, anime Foxy, Yandere Chica. Anyway, this one is pretty obvious, right? Stanley is working at Circus Babies Entertainment and Rentals, that underground facility from sister location, and the dolls crawling into his mouth are a parallel to Ennard using Michael's progressively decaying body as a skin suit in that game's secret ending. I think this story might be trying to give us a more realistic interpretation of those events, or something that more closely matches what we see happening in those ending cutscenes. That instead of Michael being scooped and having a skeleton removed and all of that at the same time, that our protagonist Michael instead is being slowly filled up with animatronic pieces night after night, giving him that progressively sickly look that scares all the people around him. Stanley's story even mentions this, quote, "He staggered and stumbled down the sidewalk. Passers-by stared, some seeming worried, others just annoyed, like it inconvenienced them to see another person suffering," which feels right on point with how those cutscenes were depicted in sister location. But okay, of the 3 stories in 1:35 a.m., it's story number 3, New Kid, that's the most exciting to talk about, at least for today's episode, because this one gets to the heart of what is still to this day the single biggest question of the series, and that is the identity of Golden Freddy. Let me tell you, I thought we had this one pretty well nailed down, and it was Cassidy, aka the vengeful spirit from Ultimate Custom Night. And yet, this story, well, it causes me to question a few things about our conclusions. First, let's go through a quick summary. Devin is a 9th grade social loner alongside his only friend Mick. One
Why
day,
does
the
he
new
look
kid
like
at school,
that?
Kelsey shows interest in spending time with the two of them. Kelsey is good looking, he's charismatic, he immediately attracts the attention of all the cool kids in school. And even though Kelsey, Devin, and Mick all get along as friends, eventually Devin gets jealous of Kelsey, because Kelsey has everything that Devin wants. And so to get some revenge, he lures him to an abandoned Freddy's restaurant long forgotten at the outskirts of the town. His plan is to trap Kelsey in a spring-lock suit for a few hours to scare him, but, well, you know what's gonna happen. The sheer mention of spring-lock suit immediately gives you a spoiler alert as to what's gonna go down. Kelsey puts on the Golden Freddy suit and gets skewered alive. The blood saturated the bear's matted fur in seconds and began pooling on the floor. Devin stared at the moving blood. It looked like it was a living thing. A thinking red liquid lake stretching out. And Mick and Devin leave Kelsey for dead for fear of Devin getting in trouble. But they're not quite sure he actually died. Nearly a week later, Devin is convinced to go back and check on Kelsey, but when he does, he's in for a surprise. Kelsey has vanished. Devin eventually sticks his hand inside the suit's mouth to feel around for Kelsey's slumped-over dead body, only for the spring locks to fail again and crush his arm. As Devin lies on the floor, trapped and slowly bleeding to death, he gets a final glimpse into the suit and, well, let's just say what he sees inside rocks the foundation of what we know about this franchise. Quote, "Devin wiggled in one more attempt to free himself. The mouth opened even more, and Devin got a sudden glimpse inside the suit. He gasped. Down low, past his arm, Devin could see a body, a dead body, just like he thought he'd find when he came back here to check. But it wasn't exactly like he thought he'd find. This one had curly black hair. The body in the suit wasn't Kelsey." Now, there's a lot of weird things about this story that I don't quite have answers for, but I do have some thoughts about. First and foremost is the ending. You see, the book doesn't end with Devin's death like you'd expect. It actually continues to a final scene with Kelsey, alive and well, as the new kid at school introducing himself to 2 boys. It seems, at a first reading, like this should be a flashback to when Kelsey first meets Mick and Devin at school. Like, this was the fateful meeting that would eventually lead to multiple of their deaths. But it's not. This is Kelsey at a new school meeting two new boys. In the story, Mick meets Kelsey first and then brings Kelsey over to meet Devin. It all takes place in a classroom. This closing scene, meanwhile, is outside the front doors of the school, and the 2 boys Kelsey introduced himself to are less social outcasts like Mick and Devin, and more like bullies. We're expressly told that the boys are snickering at the passing kids. Even Kelsey's first line to them is different. It implies that Kelsey has somehow lived on after his supposed Springtrap death in Golden Freddy, and now he's the new kid at yet another new school, introducing himself to two new kids. And the way that this final scene is written, with Kelsey scoping out the two boys from afar before he approaches them, it feels like he's actively targeting loner kids to make friends with. Could this be Kelsey's attempt to befriend kids that most overlook and then lure them back to a Freddy's Pizzeria for some tragic incident to happen? It seems like it would be a stretch, but let's talk about Kelsey himself. Mr. Perfect. Kelsey is a weird entity in all this. Throughout the story, there are moments when his behavior is specifically called out as slightly off. Quote from the book, Kelsey tilted his head and studied Devin for a couple of seconds. For those 2 seconds, Devin had the weird feeling he was being evaluated. And again later, Devin was tempted to stab Kelsey to see if he was a robot. Kids don't say stuff like that. Once they're actually at the pizzeria, things go surprisingly smoothly for Devin's plan. The line in the book even goes like this, quote, this was going even better than he imagined. He thought he was going to have to talk Kelsey into trying on the Golden Freddy suit, but it looked like he was going to do it all on his own. It was like it was meant to be. All of it seems to cast some level of suspicion on Kelsey's true motivations, and that's without me even mentioning the fact that his body just goes missing at the end of the book when it has been skewered and bled to death. To me, it feels like Kelsey may just be our vengeful spirit from Ultimate Custom. In the story, Kelsey is described as having wavy blonde hair and blue eyes. Now, we have a pretty solid idea that its hair is straight, with a slight wave, and it appears to be blonde. But here's the kicker. This image was created by inverting colors. It's what gives it that blown out kind of creepy appearance. If you invert the colors of the vengeful spirit's eyes, you get blue, just like Kelsey is described in the book. And it would fit the idea of a vengeful spirit, a kid who is angry about his own death, perhaps in an accident like we see in FNAF 4, or in this particular story, looking to get revenge on other kids who are similar to his original killers. He goes from school to school, presumably ones near Fazbear locations, to somehow trick kids into getting killed by the suit. The parallels with Vengeful Spirit even go to the moments right around Kelsey's death in the book. This is how it's described, and the sound wasn't the bad part. It was bad, yes, but the bad part, the really, really bad part, was the way the suit started jerking in a spastic, horrific dance. It looked like the moth-eaten, mildew-blotched gold bear was convulsing, but it wasn't the bear, it was Kelsey. It's remarkably similar to the final cutscene from Ultimate Custom Night, where we see again an angry Golden Freddy, presumably filled with the vengeful spirit, twitching off into the darkness. Also worth noting is that the spring-lock suits are apparently big enough for kids to slump down into the body. Devin, when he initially can't find Kelsey's body inside the suit, decides to dig deeper down into it. Quote, had Kelsey somehow slid down into the suit? Was that his hair that Devin could see? This, to me, confirms what we see in FNAF 4's storage room cutscene, the strange tuft of hair that's coming out of the body of the suit. Back then, we weren't sure what this was trying to tell us, what that tuft of hair was meant to be. But now, I think we can safely conclude that it is indeed a child stuffed into that body. And that
You see, the problem with saying that is you're basically saying that that's a random dead kid, so it really doesn't make any sense. I don't think that Cassidy was killed around the time of Fredbear's. I feel like the only animatronic that was killed around the time of Fredbear's... What did I say? Animatronic? I feel like the only child that was killed around Fredbear's was maybe Charlotte. I need to research, I guess, but I don't know. I don't think that's a dead kid. I think it looks like a dead kid, like the hair, but I feel like it's just like straps or something for the head. I don't know.
we're only seeing the top tuft of hair poking out. It would seem to imply that there was a victim before the bite of 1983, and that the crying child was somehow aware of at least one, if not multiple, of past victims shoved inside the suit. But all of this brings us to the obvious question of this story. The curly black hair at the bottom of the suit. Who's that? And honestly, I'm not sure. Cassidy, which is what we've been assuming to be Golden Freddy's name this entire time, does indeed have black hair, but it's always been described as long and straight. In the fourth closet, we physically see Cassidy, and she's described as this, quote, "That's Cassidy, a girl with long black hair." And in the survival logbook, where we first learned of Cassidy's name, there's this girl who, again, has long, black, straight hair. And that's something worth pointing out, for as chaotic as the story in this franchise has been for all its iterations, names and hairstyles and colors of the victims seem to be fairly consistent. Susie is always associated with her dog. She has blonde hair with curls and blue eyes. Cassidy always appears to have straight black hair. Fritz always has freckles. The names and the faces of the surrounding characters may change, but the missing children all seem to be fairly consistent in both name and physical description, which is an important detail to keep track of moving forward. So could all of this mean that Vengeful Spirit and Cassidy are two separate entities?
No.
That two spirits might both be in possession of Golden Freddy.
Yes.
That Cassidy isn't really associated with Golden Freddy at all, and is instead the identity of one of the other animatronics.
No.
Because in Fourth Closet, she technically wasn't the one who was associated with Golden Freddy. Honestly, I don't know. I need to actually review the evidence for this one, and I encourage you to do the same. The last thing worth mentioning for all of us to chew on is the mysterious slithering that's heard throughout this story. While the boys are exploring the abandoned pizzeria, they hear something inexplicable in the walls. Quote, they were in the bathroom, Devin was pretty sure he heard something slithering through the walls. He didn't say anything. From the way the other boys' faces paled, he knew they heard it too. They didn't mention it either. It's never mentioned again. Nothing ever comes of this strange little detail, but it's clearly important because more inexplicable, strange sounds come from the Freddy torso after Kelsey dies. In a later quote, "Did you leave anything else?" He tried to ignore the fact that the scuttling sound was coming from the bear suit. Now, this is after Kelsey has already stopped squirming and twitching. So again, we're left with some mysterious force moving around in the pizzeria, creating these sorts of sounds. Is it Ennard? Is it the Stitch Raid? Is it something else? Like I said, lots to chew on with this particular book, but as you can tell, it's given us pretty explicit information about some of the biggest questions that this series has had. Now it's up to us, as always, to put all those pieces together. There certainly are a lot of pieces that'll start coming together next time as we start looking into the power of agony and the twisted timeline of FNAF's next newest murderer, the Stitch Raid. So make sure you hit that subscribe button to get notified of when that video comes out next week. And in the meantime, do me a favor, remember, it's just a theory, a game theory. Thanks for watching.
So right now we're getting into the book theories. Oh, security breach, security breach, security breach. Okay, we're almost done with the... Actually, no. We're not almost done with the book theories. The book theories never end.
Protection. Go all in. Glad with Clorox eliminates food and bacterial odors.
Yay. I never understood those. Like, how do you put a syringe up to metal? That syringes can't go into metal. They only go into, like, skin and stuff. You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm not crazy, right?
It's alive. It's alive. It's... Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory, where today we're covering the scariest topic in all of FNAF lore, the timeline. But not for the games. Oh, jeez, no, I hate myself, but not that much. Woo, I'll probably have to do that at some point down the line, but not today. No, what we're covering today is a different timeline.
Thank you.
There's a new monster afoot in the FNAF universe, a killer that has horrifically taken the lives of nearly a dozen people. A killer has yet unseen in the games, but one will after today's theory provide us with key insights into how this whole FNAF universe works, the true nature of Remnant, and how ghosts can possess endoskeletons. As I said, he hasn't been in a game yet, but I have a feeling he'll be showing up soon. Maybe
Nope.
as soon as the new game's security breach. But in order to know for sure, it's our job to track his movements.
Nope. You see, security breach is about the mimic.
Understand what his goals are, where he's headed to next. You see, last FNAF theory we did a surface level
The
analysis
mimic.
of 1:35 a.m., the latest installment of the Fazbear Fright series, and boy was that one a biggie, with huge revelations about sister location, ultimate custom nights, vengeful spirit, and the real identity, or should I say identities, of Golden Freddy. And looking back, since the Fazbear Frights books became a thing, I've done 5 theories on them, covering the many connections that they have to the various facets
No,
of FNAF.
not just.
From mysteries
Wait,
of
they
murder
all have Golden Freddy in the thumbnail. That's funny.
connections that they have to the various facets of FNAF lore. From new strings of murders happening in 1985 to the true identity of Psychic Fred Bear. But despite all
Aw,
of this
man,
new
he
FNAF
didn't
talk,
sing the
there's been
song.
one element I've largely been glossing over, the Stitch Ring. In the event that you haven't picked up any of the installments of the book series yet, let me catch you up. Each new book contains 3 short stories, right? That's the selling feature. It's what's advertised on the back of the box, so to speak. But each one also comes with a bit of a bonus. In reality, each book is more like 3 1/5 stories. You see, each one ends with an epilogue, or little MCU post-credits teaser, giving us a piece of yet another story. The tale of the Stitch Ring, a story that appears to be spanning out across the ending of each and every book in this new series. And that alone would be pretty darn cool, right? Also, it's a brilliant marketing tactic to keep us buying more just to see the end of this thing. Slow clap, Scott Collins. Slow clap. But 3 segments in, and it's becoming clear that the tale of the Stitch Wraith isn't just another horror tale. It's instead a running thread throughout nearly every other shorter story that we've been reading through, which in turn seems to connect it both to the original trilogy of books, as well as even the games. So in order to understand what this thing is and where the lore is headed, it's time to go Easter egg hunting for a monster. Now, admittedly, my first theory on the Fazbear Frights books briefly covered the Stitch Wraith, and back then I assumed he was Ennard. The Wraith was described in that book as a mysterious figure wearing a black cloak and wearing a white mask with features drawn in thick black marker. The description specifically calls out his 2 eyes, one of which appears to be blacked out, a big toothy grin with blood around the mouth, and a limping or shambling walk. White mask, blacked out eye, shamble, shake. It seems like a slam dunk for Ennard. However, the epilogue for 1:35 a.m. threw that hypothesis out the window, as it revealed just exactly how the Stitch Wraith was brought to life, a process that actually reveals a lot about how this series' mythos works. In this epilogue, we're introduced to Dr. Phineas Taggart, not to be confused with his friend Dr. Ferb Fletcher. Phineas is a bit of a mad scientist type, studying the untapped power of human emotion. As he says himself, quote, "Human emotion is slower to impact, more insidious. It emanates from us, or is excreted from us."
Controversial opinion. Oh yeah, it does make sense about like Burn Trap. Controversial opinion. I feel like Afton would be better as Burn Trap and stuff. Yes, I know it ruins the FNAF 6 ending, but I don't know. Everyone, when they first played Security Breach, was like, "Oh, it's Afton! He's back!" Like, I don't know. It's just, I don't know why. And then if you want to find out who he is, you have to read books, which I think is still really dumb, to find out important parts of the story. Like, you should be finding that out in the games, not the books. But, I don't know. It feels right that he would be Afton rather than the Mimic, which is, I don't know. Even though I can definitely see with, like, the Mimic and, like, the drool and tears on the glitch trap model and him mimicking... that's cool. But I feel like he should be his own character. They should get rid of Afton and make the Mimic its own thing. Not related to Afton. Maybe he could watch Afton kill, and then the Mimic would just start getting smarter and smarter until it's like the main villain of the series, of this new era of the series with like Security Breach. But I don't think if they're gonna bring in the Mimic, it shouldn't be based off of Afton. I don't know. Just a hot take. Yeah, I agree, but it seems like they going with the Mimic. Yeah, I know. If I had the choice for the Mimic to be like another version of Afton or its own thing, I would make the Mimic its own thing. Like, maybe, I mean, you have such, like, you could do so much with a character that mimics other characters. But they're just doing, like, the cheap way out with making Afton again. I don't know. But yeah.
Must like sweat or tears, and it wafts outward like a noxious cloud soaking into the surroundings. In particular, his research is centered around the intense emotion of agony. In order to study it, we see that Phineas collects hundreds of haunted objects to search for this
Rubik's
emotion
Cube.
inside. Again, from the book, the word haunted could mean showing signs of torment or some kind of mental anguish. These items on Phineas's shelves weren't possessed by ghosts. The ones that were truly haunted were energized by agony. Agony, I'm convinced, radiates farther from people than any other emotion, Phineas said. My work is focused on the process that you can take a saturation of agony, add any sort of intelligence, even an artificial one, and they'll combine together to transmute the energy of emotion into the energy of physical action. This, I believe, is what explains what people call haunted objects. And already you might be starting to see how this all ties into what we already know about this franchise. In FNAF 6's Insanity ending, we were introduced to the blueprints outlining how the sister location Scooper worked. And it was, well, it was not what we expected, to say the least. Through those blueprints, we learned about the mystery metal called Remnant, and its ability to supposedly give life to objects that it touches. The novel The Fourth Closet took it one step further and showed us the Remnant metal being created and used. In that story, we watch as William Afton melts down pieces of the old animatronics, creating a remnant soup that he then uses to give life to new living robots, specifically the Funtime animatronics. Quote, on the heating table rested the endoskeletons of the original Freddy's animatronics, welded and melted together, immobile and featureless, and still inhabited by the spirits of the children who had been murdered inside of them so many years ago, still filled with life and motion and thought, all trapped, all in terrible pain. Usually this goes into something mechanical, something I made, William said. If we remember back to Candy Cadet's stories of 5 things always becoming one thing, 5 kittens getting sewn together, or 5 keys melted down into one, this is exactly what those stories were referring to. But Phineas's experiments in 1:35 a.m. actually take it one step further and give us more insight into the true nature of Remnant. Things that are brought to life via Remnant aren't necessarily infused with a soul, but instead with agony, with intense human emotion, with extreme human suffering. This is important because it means that characters like Balloon Boy, the Bitty Babs, and the Mini Arenas and Sister Location, heck, even animatronics like Mangle, don't necessarily need to have actual victims associated with them. We used to look at solving the mysteries of this series as having it be one-to-one all the time. Susie equals Chica, Charlie equals the puppet, Cassidy equals Golden Freddy. But what we're starting to learn is that there are other ways to bring things to life in this series, that some animatronics may contain multiple souls, like we talked about last time with Golden Freddy, and some might not contain any souls at all, as long as it always ties back to some extreme tragedy filled with this all-powerful emotion of agony. So with that little analysis in place, let's go back to our story. We see Phineas collect objects associated with horrific tragedies, and via some means funnel all the agony from them down into an endoskeleton, which wears this...
I'll be right back.
Endoskeleton here. Phineas then puts the head of a large 3-foot doll on it. A doll whose description bears a shocking similarity to Blank, actually, from the fan game 5 Nights at Candy's, and finally a battery pack before turning this beast on. And not only does this modern Frankenstein come to life, it immediately kills its creator, Phineas, seemingly by accident, surprisingly, and then runs off, hiding under a black cloak. The Stitch Wraith has been born. But okay, why am I making such a big deal out of this thing? Why why does this guy deserve his own episode? Well, because solving the Stitch Wraith story in these books is like a game unto itself. You see, there have been very subtle clues hidden throughout the 9 other stories in the series that connect things back to the Stitch Wraith. My first clue was the battery pack Phineas uses to power the Stitch Wraith.
Jump scare start.
Because it's not just any battery pack. It came from Fetch, the murder animatronic dog from book 2 of the series. Quote, the item in the second box was an animatronic dog that clearly no longer functioned. The dog was an ugly dog, with a triangle-shaped head and a wide mouth full of sharp teeth. In minutes, he'd revealed the dog's battery pack. So immediately we know that the Stitch Wraith story is happening after the events of the Fetch story from book number 2. So I dug around deeper and more connections kept coming. Earlier in this same book, in the title story 1:35 a.m. about the haunted Ella doll, there's one line referencing a man named Phineas looking online for a particular toy. Quote again, one of the searches for special Ella doll led her to an online ad posted by a user named Phineas who was trying to find one of the dolls. His ad referenced the special Ella doll and said he was willing to pay a premium for the doll's energy. Overall, across the 9 stories published so far, 7 seem to tie back to the Stitch Wraith, allowing us to create a rough timeline of events. So bear with me as we go through this. We know that 1:35 a.m. and Fetch must come first because Phineas is alive and looking for the Ella doll like I just mentioned, and the evil robot dog has just started his murder spree. From there comes the story we just covered, Epilogue 3 and the Stitch Wraith's creation. After that, he begins to roam the city collecting body parts for some purpose. You may remember book number 1 story to be beautiful, in which Baby hacks apart a human girl named Sarah in order to steal her identity. Sarah is rebuilt out of junk, only for her to fall to pieces at the end. Well, in epilogue number 1, we hear that the Stitch Wraith was seen collecting those junk pieces of Sarah. Odd, right? It's not the only time that it happens either. In book number 2, there's the story Out of Stock about a group of friends who steal a defective plush trap doll, one with oddly human-like eyes and teeth, only for it to go on a rampage. The boys manage to escape by luring it in front of an oncoming train where it gets shattered to pieces. And again, in epilogue number 2, we see the Stitch Wraith on the scene, salvaging whatever he can find of the room. And that's where it would seem to end if it weren't for one other small detail. You see, in one of the other stories in this book, Room for One More, about a security guard being force-fed mini Rena dolls in the basement of Circus Babies Entertainment and Rentals, there's a passing reference to a restaurant called the Snack Space. Hey man, I was picking up a takeout order at Luigi's the other night and saw your ex on a date with the manager of the Snack Space. Seems super unimportant, right? Well, it would be if this was the only time that it was mentioned, but it's popped up in one of the other stories. In Into the Pit, the very first story, the one about the time-traveling ball pit, the Snack Space is where the protagonist's father works, which means that Circus Babies Entertainment and Rentals' sister location is also in that world, which in turn connects it to one final story, Count the Ways, where we see an old, broken Funtime Freddy planning to execute a girl trapped inside of his stomach. And while these aren't necessarily directly tied to the Stitch Wraith, it certainly feels like at some point all of these stories will come together, as though we're working on chunks of a larger puzzle. We've got a big chunk over here, that's the Stitch Wraith connections, and a big chunk over here that's all connected through sister location and the Snack Space, and then you have a few other random pieces over here, and by the end I expect all of them will come together. So assuming that they
That's
are
some
all
weird
connected,
puzzle.
the timeline seems to go about like this. Lonely Freddy, the story about the kids getting mind swapped with mini Freddy dolls, has to be first, because it's the only one of these stories so far where Fazbear locations are open and ready for business. At some point, Freddy Fazbear's closes, leading to Room for One More about the underground facility filled with mini Renas hoping to escape, which would parallel what we hear in sister location.
Due to the massive success, and even more so the unfortunate closing of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, it was clear that the stage was set, no pun intended, for another contender in children's entertainment.
At some point, Baby and the mini Renas escape from that underground facility, leading to 1:35 a.m. with Phineas looking for the haunted doll and Greg activating the murder dog in an abandoned Freddy Fazbear's in Fetch. From there, the next major moment is Stitch Wraith's creation in Epilogue 3, which then leads to his quest for body parts in To Be Beautiful Epilogue 1 and Out of Stock Epilogue 2. We also know that Into the Pit and the New Kid happen near the end of the timeline, since they both feature a closed down, forgotten, or repurposed Freddy's building. Also, there's Count the Ways, which is towards the end of this timeline, grouped with these other stories since a retired Funtime Freddy is just randomly sitting in a garage killing kids. What does all of this tell us? What was the purpose of doing all this work? Well, first, all of this seems to connect us pretty solidly into the book trilogy. The fact that we have an Ella doll infused with agony that Phineas wants his hands on perfectly matches the Ella doll that Henry made for his daughter Charlie. To quote from the fourth closet, agony erupted, flooding the room with its sound. A man lay curled on the floor, something cradled tightly in his arms, and when his mouth opened, the room shook with the sound of his anguish. Who is that? Charlie said anxiously. What is he holding? You don't recognize her? Elizabeth said. That's Ella, of course. It's all your father had left after you were taken. He cried over that cheap store-bought rag doll for 2 months, cried into it, bled into it, poured his grief over it, end quote. At which point, he makes the robotic Ella doll that we talked about in the last episode. So what we're seeing in these stories appears to be, at least to some extent, the aftermath of...
Is someone doing fireworks? I don't know if you heard that, but that really scared me. Someone was doing like fireworks outside or like gunshots or something. That's really weird. Welcome back, Switch Zone.
That which also means that we might already know the true identity of the Stitch Ring. It's a bit of a long shot, but it's my personal headcanon until proven otherwise. I think that the endoskeleton that powers the Stitch Ring, the main body that's become the conduit for all of this is the same endoskeleton that killed Henry. The robot that he used to end his own life. The stabbing robot, which, let's be honest, is like the most complicated way to do that sort of thing. Like, build a robot to stab you to death? What? Creative types, man, they are weird. Anyway, we're told in the Silver Eyes that it's a basic Gen 1 endoskeleton with an unfinished face, which would explain exactly why Phineas needs to put a head on it. Quote from the Silver Eyes, she could see its face. If it could be called a face. Its features were scarcely formed, crude and shapeless. Its blind eyes were only raised bumps like the eyes of a statue, seeing nothing but its own grief. We also know that this endoskeleton would be absolutely filled to the brim with agony. I mean, as far as endoskeletons go, a murder bot built by a grieving father is a pretty huge deal. And it's apparently an important enough character to this franchise to have also appeared at the end of the book trilogy. When Charlie is being attacked by Baby, it's this same murder bot and its trusty knife that Charlie uses to do them both in. I have a very, very strong theorist instinct that the Stitch Wraith will, at some point during this book series, be revealed to be connected back to Henry and his bizarre death.
Yeah, no.
Hey, the pieces are in place for us. Oh yeah, and assuming that the Fazbear Fright series is connected a bit closer to the book trilogy, like it appears to be, we know that Book 5, Bunny Call, features a story about a man with gruesome burns over his body and an iron will to live. I mean, we already suspected that that was William Afton, but going back to see how his story ended in the fourth closet, we see that his death is far from certain. In his final moments, his hospital gown catches fire and he's pulled into a massive furnace. But then, nothing. No official confirmation that that burning actually kills him. Therefore, a burned man in a hospital who refuses to die sounds like a certain yellow bunny we all know who always comes back. And with that, I've had enough FNAF for now. Oh man, it has been a lot. The new book comes out in early July, so at the very least I get a break for a couple of weeks. Thank goodness. No, no, no! Man, I am on edge these days. 2020 has really started to mess with my head. I need to relax. But I've seen all of this, literally everything on every streaming platform. If only there was something new to watch.
The Nut Job!
Our sponsor for today's episode, NordVPN. What are you doing here, Nord? I'm looking for new entertainment today, not military-grade encryption of all my...
That was... 2020 was 3 years ago? Blech. Alright, here we go.
Listen, paying $14.99 a month for a streaming app and $9.99 a month for a music app.
Nope.
You can be a pirate, but first you'll have to lose an eye and an arm. You can be a pirate. To lose an eye and an arm. First, to lose an eye and an arm. Lose an eye, lose an arm, lose an arm, lose an arm. And an arm.
Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory, the show that is, without exaggeration, thinking of reaching out to Scott Cawthon so that we can jointly buy Chuck E. Cheese's quickly dying restaurant franchise so we can transform them into what they were always meant to be, real-world FNAF experiences. Heck, they've already got the terrible pizza taken care of. We could probably
Pizza the Hut.
originals and make a whole series about transforming the pizzerias into horror-themed dining experiences, which would also help mitigate the costs of doing all that. No joking here, Scott. This is something we absolutely can and probably should do. I've recreated your games before in real life, and they seem to be pretty well received. So, between my theater background and your, well, you know, your gobs of money and masterminding of the IP, I think we can make something that's really cool. And yeah, the reason I'm bringing it up here is so fans can start talking about the idea both here and on Reddit to show you how excited they are for this to happen. Anyway, let me just leave it at, have my email.
Has Scott and MapPad ever met? Like, in person? The first game theory I watched was the Did Reddit just saw FNAF theory about the crying child. Which one? I'd say I don't know what the first game theory I watched was. I think it might have been probably this one. The Killer's Promise. FNAF Sister Location. Sister Location was around the time that I really started getting into FNAF. Like, I liked FNAF around FNAF 2, but Sister Location was when I really got into it. Yeah.
Eagerly await your response. Who knows, you've probably already
That picture is so old.
Just waiting to reveal that fact to the world. Speaking of Chuck E. Cheese restaurants, the grandpappy of FNAF, I actually have a theory in the works about those pizzerias that any FNAF fan will enjoy. The episode will be going live in the next few weeks on my newest theory channel, Food Theory, which, if you haven't checked out yet, you totally should. Link is down in the description. Yes, it sounds like a joke. No, it's not.
I used to, when I first found Food Theory, I actually thought it was a joke. But then I started watching, I'm like, oh wow, it's not.
Chuck E. Cheese on the way, but also horror episodes like how the ghost of KFC's Colonel Sanders has been cursing people for decades. Yes, it is a real thing that we are currently researching. It's the same science, math, and over-research that we do over here, except, you know...
No,
on a
Colonel
real-life
Sanders,
topic.
you're wrong.
Anyone who's hesitant to check
My
out
mom
the
was
channel
right.
for food, we're already winning people over. Like Jack here over on Twitter, who said he started out skeptical, but watched the episodes and immediately got the concept. We've got over 500,000 subscribers in the first 24 hours, and we're getting really, really close to that million in these first 2 weeks. So please, please, please help us reach that milestone in record time. Show the world how passionate we theorists are by shattering that subscriber record. And hey, FNAF even already has made an appearance on the show. It's in every single intro of Food Theory. So subscribe to Food Theory today to get your daily...
Yeah, I didn't, like, I got tired of FNAF, like, around, middle of 2017, I think, because I know that I stopped getting into FNAF around, like, before FNAF 6 was released, so when I came back to it in, like, maybe 2020? Yeah, I think I came back into it around 2020, and I bought a Lefty figure because I thought it was just, like, cool. And then I realized that they made FNAF 6, FNAF Ultimate Custom Night, and then FNAF VR, so I had, like, 3 games to watch. And, yeah, here we are.
Dose of brain food in a sucky, no good, awful year. Seeing so many people excited about this new channel has really helped us all out. So thank you guys for your support. Thank you for your subscription, and I can't wait to deliver you more. It's been a lot of work, but it's.
Oh yeah, Dan TDM was awesome to watch. I remember watching the FNAF 2 playthrough with Dan TDM and just watching with my friend. It was fun.
Really fun. All right, a new month, a new FNAF book, a new set of lore reveals. Earlier this month, the latest Fazbear Fright book, Step Closer, hit store shelves, and even though it has a super forgettable name, the stories inside of it are epic. Not just because they're some of the most gruesome in the series. I mean, page 1 literally starts with
I love Step Closer, it's really good.
Gets popped by Foxy's hook, but because of the lore drops that are happening in this thing, they are huge. Up until this point, the Fazbear Frights books have given us interesting concepts to chew on, fleshing out the world of FNAF and giving us new insights into events that we already had a pretty good handle on. It's been useful, certainly, but nothing too earth-shattering. Animatronics can have people stuffed inside of them. Confirmed outright in book 1. People can have animatronics stuffed inside of them. Confirmed in book 3. Everything is powered by human agony. The missing children's incident probably happened in 1985. Animatronics can steal identities. Humans can be body swapped with animatronics. Golden Freddy might have multiple souls trapped inside of him. Ghosts might be able to escape from their animatronic prisons to lure more people to them. Like, there has been a lot across all of these stories, hence why I've been covering these books so much. But Step Closer's lore drops are attacking some of the biggest lingering questions still in existence from these games. The ones presented to us by the two most frustrating games in the franchise, FNAF 4 and FNAF 6. Questions that are still hotly debated by the FNAF community. So today we're looking at the first of those debates, the ones related to FNAF 4, looking at what those answers mean for the...
First full FNAF playthrough I watched was of Security Breach by a YouTuber I liked named Yub. It was a good choice because I have really short attention span. I've never watched Yub, but the first playthrough of Security Breach that I watched was actually of Dan TDM. Yes, I still watch Dan TDM. I don't watch him as much as I used to, but, you know, if he uploads a new video, I might watch it like the next day or something. But, yeah, I bought Security Breach, like, the day after release, or, like, the day of release. Actually, no, it was the day of release, because I was really excited for it. And I bought it, but at the time, I only had a really crappy laptop. So, that first chase with Monty and Chica and Roxy, that would not work. It was impossible because of how big Security Breach was. So instead, the next day, I just watched Dan TDM play it because, wait, no, it wasn't around the time of Security Breach released. It was like around the 20th, I think, of December, around December 20th, because it came out on the 16th. But Dan TDM had to have been done with Security Breach because, yeah, I don't know, but I watched the whole playthrough like the day after I tried to buy it.
Rest of the series
La, 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 la.
confirm the identity of this guy, the older brother Foxy Bro. Real
This
quick though,
guy.
before we get to the meat of this theory, let's quickly speed our way through probably the least important story of this new trio, the middle one titled Dance With. In it, we cover Casey, a young woman who's coming from a tragic childhood. She lives on the street picking pockets and nabbing purses. One day,
Minecraft.
a mother and a young girl outside of Circus Baby's Pizza World, which we're told has itself a big red door. Woo, 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 woo. Potentially important detail alert. Anyway, one of the items that she nabs is a set of cardboard glasses. When Casey puts them on, she sees a hologram of Ballora spinning in the distance. Weirded out by this, she has other people try the glasses on and no one else manages to see Ballora. From that point onward, each time she puts on the glasses, the hologram gets closer and closer, which begins to freak her out to the point of her leaving town and trying to put her life back together in hopes that it gets Ballora to leave her alone. A couple cities and failed jobs later, Casey eventually decides to return the stolen items to the mother and the daughter, hoping that it'll make amends. The family welcomes her in and forgives her, but when the little girl Isabella puts the glasses on, she not only sees Ballora, but she immediately begins dancing. It's a very
That
vague
looks so
ending because it's unclear whether Ballora, who was one step away from getting Casey, instead nabs the girl because she's the one who puts the glasses on next, and the dancing is the girl becoming possessed, or if it's the girl just excited to be dancing alongside one of her favorite characters, Laura. Anyway, there's not a whole lot to talk about with this one. The technology is super strange. Freddy's is apparently advanced enough to have holographics that work in cheap cardboard glasses for kids.
Hey, I can do that. I can make holograms in cardboard glasses. Yeah, totally.
Strange enough, but there's also some extra weirdness that the holograms can interact with the physical world. We see throughout the story that this Ballora hologram kicks up leaves and causes them to swirl around her. To quote from the story, there was Ballora, pirouetting among the colorful fall leaves. As she spun, the bright leaves were sucked into her vortex. For a few seconds, Casey admired the beauty, but then she thought, wait, if Ballora is just a picture, a hologram, then how is she affecting the objects around her? It didn't make sense. Welcome to the world of being a FNAF theorist, Casey. It didn't make sense. Prepare to get that one tattooed on your forehead. But in all seriousness, it does raise a big question.
I think I randomly watched this theory for some reason last year. So far, this is the scary part to me. Because I watch every new game theory FNAF video because... I don't know. I just do. But every single theory that I've watched, I remember to some extent. Kind of. The earlier theories, I mean, I don't remember too much, but still, I remember how the first theory was MatPat, like, making connections to an old murder. I remember another one was him talking about how Phone Guy is the purple guy. But, so I feel like I've watched every single one of these at some point. Also, I'm just going to quickly say, I skipped this one because it was 2 hours, and I was thinking, it's a live stream, it probably has no significance, but I'm going to start it at some point, off stream, and I'm going to check if it's a theory or a live stream or not, and if it's not a live stream, then we'll watch it in the next part. So, yeah, wait.
Are somehow revealing her. It's unclear. Today I'm going to be talking a lot about those weird little details that just seem so oddly specific for a book to call out that it feels like the book is trying to tell us something. And this seems like one of them, but well, I could spend a lot of time trying to figure it out. To my knowledge, holographic or invisible animatronics haven't really been a thing yet in the franchise, so we'll just have to cross that bridge when it becomes important. Unless, oh damn it, it might be a phantom animatronic. No, they don't interact with the real world, do they? Last point to be made about this story, though, is its recurring theme of mothers and motherhood. A lot of the backstory that we get on Casey is her troubled relationship with her mom, which has played a big part in how her life ended up the way it did. Casey, throughout the story, is also visited by an older woman at a bus station that gives her grandmotherly advice. She's saved from the police by another elderly woman. She makes amends with that mother and daughter that have a relationship that she envies. I mean, it could be me thinking too much about this, big surprise, but it doesn't feel like a coincidence that Ballora is the main animatronic featured in a story about motherly relationships. I had a theory a long time ago, 2 years ago, that Ballora was some sort of stand-in for Mrs. Afton. Not in any sort of creepy way, get your mind out of the gutters. I mean that she represents the wife that William Afton lost or divorced him, or most likely that he abandoned in the aftermath of his daughter getting clawed to death by Baby. I mean, just look at the song that Ballora sings in Sister Location.
Why do you hide inside your wall when there is music in my hall? All I see is an empty room, no more joy, an empty tomb.
An empty tomb, aka the bedroom of our tragically deceased child. William hides inside his walls by diving even deeper into his work. It's something that William's partner Henry does in the original novel trilogy. When he loses his daughter, he shuts out the rest of the world, hiding behind his walls and obsessing over his work to try and bring her back. And so when William does this in the games, his wife is left alone and probably ends up leaving him. As such, as some sort of coping mechanism, William recreates her in animatronic form, depicting her with perpetually shut eyes because to William, she was blind to what needed to be done to rebuild the family. Blind to the fact that his work was so important. She wanted to move on, to do frivolous things like sing and spin and dance, or at least that's how he felt from his perspective. William Afton was mired in his own misery of loss. Like I said, it's a bit of a stretch and something that I've likely talked about before, but I thought the connection between Ballora and mothers in this story was particularly interesting and worth calling out. Anyway, onward to the real story I want to address today, Step Closer, which isn't just sparking new theories, but is straight up confirming stuff that we've argued about for years. In it, we meet Pete, a 16-year-old who, due to their parents' divorce, has to babysit his little brother, Chuck the Chump. One day, while watching him at a Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria,
Love that guy.
worried about having to be the responsible one, decides to scare Chuck a little by taking him backstage to see an out-of-service Foxy. Pete fires up the machine and Chuck runs away, leaving Pete alone to get seemingly hypnotized by Foxy's performance. A performance that repeats one line.
Yard, 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 yard.
Pirate, but first you'll have to lose an eye and an arm. And from there, you can probably guess what happens. Over the next few days, Pete gets into multiple accidents that put either his eye or his arm in danger. A scalpel nearly hits his eye in science class. A butcher knife almost chops off his hand at the store. A buzzsaw blade shoots out at him from a nearby construction site. He gets hooked in the face by a fishing line, and he almost loses a hand to a Chinese finger trap at the school carnival. Anyway, the two brothers eventually make amends and come to the realization that Pete needs to face down Foxy to break some curse. Pete rushes to Freddy's, but in his panic, he's hit by an oncoming truck and killed. Out of nowhere. It's this awful, awful reveal that you absolutely do not see coming because you feel so bad for this kid. You're like, oh, he's apologized to his brother. They have a good relationship. They have a plan for getting Pete out of this after him being brutalized for the better part of a week. He's on his way to close off the story, and then, bam, it just ends. And that would be where the story ends.
Chuck the Chump should have been in FNAF Ultimate Custom Night. He should have been there instead of anyone else. He should have been the first one there. Chuck the Chump. It's so funny.
Except for one thing, Pete is still alive. Kinda. We pick up back in the hospital where Pete's soul is trapped inside of his own dead body. Pete is an organ donor. Against his will, I might add. Thanks a lot for signing me up for that one, Mom. And they just got an emergency request for, you guessed it, an eye and a hand. Pete is forced to helplessly watch as his body is taken apart by surgeons. Like I said at the beginning of this episode, this story is shocking. But what's even more shocking is the lore confirmation that we get in this thing. Pete's story 100% confirms for us that Foxy Bro, the older kid from FNAF 4 who repeatedly traumatizes his younger brother before eventually getting him chomped in the jaws of Fredbear, that is undeniably Michael Afton. 100% no doubt. It's something that we strongly suspected for a while.
Chuck the Chump does need to be in the FNAF movie. He needs to be in Help Wanted 2, Ruin. If he's not in Ruin, I'm gonna be mad. When does... Oh yeah, that, Step Closer is, like, takes place around FNAF, like, one of the locations. So, he could come in FNAF Ruin and be, like, a old man or something.
Something that later evidence started to throw into question, but this story, happening 5 years after that game's initial release, finally clears it up for us. Obviously, there are some superficial similarities here.
Wait, how long is it?
Clears it up for us. Obviously, there are some superficial similarities. Game's initial release.
July 23rd, 2015. That is scary. Oh my goodness. It's July 21st. That is scary how close that is. So, 8 years? Ugh. I'm old. In 2 days, FNAF 4 is gonna be 8 years old. Oh my goodness, I'm old.
These finally clears it up for us. Obviously, there are some superficial similarities here. Pete has a younger brother who's scared of the animatronics.
Why FNAF will never end. What? Oh.
Just like Foxy Bro has the crying child, his younger brother who's scared of the animatronics. Pete is connected to Foxy throughout the story, just like the brother in the Foxy mask. Pete and Chuck's parents are divorced, just like it seems William and Mrs. Afton are in the game, leaving the older brothers alone to care for their younger siblings. At one point in the story, Pete's hand starts to turn purple.
Oh my goodness.
Michael Afton and sister location physically turning purple. And lastly is that final scene where Pete should be dead, but isn't, which exactly mirrors the iconic words of one Michael Afton.
It's me, my
all of it is just a bunch of weak parallels between Foxy Bro and Michael and Pete, and Foxy Bro and Pete. How do we know for sure that all three of these characters are connected? One word, gum. People ask me a lot how I come up with these theories, and more often than not, it's small details that just stick out as off for the author or game designer to include, as though they're purposely seeding these details out there to try and signal something to us. And in this particular story, the odd character detail of Pete is that he chews gum a lot. Page 4, he's chewing
So do I. I love gum.
watermelon gum while watching his brother. Later, when he's scared by the Foxy animatronic, the book makes mention of him swallowing that gum. Okay, that's fine, that's a one-off thing, no big deal. But later, on the way to the butcher shop, we're told that he, quote, pops a wad of watermelon gum into his mouth. On the boat fishing with his dad, he wishes he had brought his watermelon gum. It is mentioned a lot in this short story, enough that it sparked my theorist senses and made me flag it to look into later. Now, obviously, at no point during FNAF 4, or heck, any of the games, do we see a character actively chewing gum. That'd be silly, but that's not the only place that we see these characters at this point. Let me direct your attention back to the FNAF Survival Logbook. Who knew that a book with dabbing Chica
Stop showing me that. Stop. Enough. Get it off. Thank you.
It's the logbook originally owned by Mike, as we see on the title page, that helped us to solve for Cassidy's name. And wouldn't you know it, but today it's also the thing that's gonna now reveal to us Michael Afton's true identity. Page 49, quote, list 10 bad habits you'd like to break. Number 1, chewing gum excessively. I mean, there it is, plain as day. Pete chews gum excessively. Michael Afton chews gum excessively. Pete eventually turns purple and comes back to life after being dead. Michael Afton eventually turns purple and comes to life after being dead.
That
Pete is
didn't
an older brother who scares his younger sibling using Foxy. Foxy Bro in FNAF 4 is an older brother who scares his younger sibling with Foxy. Pete equals Michael, and Michael equals FNAF 4's Foxy Bro. Done, confirmed, another character identity locked. This detail has been sitting in the logbook for years, just waiting to be used. Kind of impressive. Well done there, Scott. Well done. And this confirmation tells us everything we need to know about Michael's motivation for the rest of the game series. He's avenging his brother's death, the one that he made happen. When Golden Freddy appearances are accompanied by the words, "It's me," it is literally the younger brother saying, "It's me. I'm here," to his older brother. But of course, it is never that easy. This same security logbook, this thing that has been so pivotal to solving so many mysteries of this franchise, raises just as many challenges. Because sure, here it just confirmed the Foxy Bro connection, but then it also has lines like these. Page 103, the party was for you. Page 75, does he still talk to you? In reference to psychic friend Fredbear. Page 23, was your favorite childhood toy a plastic purple telephone? Page 20, what do you remember? And most troublesome of all, page 31, do you remember your name? All of these questions seem pointed to the crying child. The party was for him. His favorite toy was the purple telephone. Fredbear did talk to him, and never to Foxy Bro as far as we know. In fact, these are the exact questions that got us to throw the Foxy-Michael connection away so many years ago. Why would the spirit in this book, Cassidy, be telling Mike things that are very clearly true of the crying child? If Mike was indeed the older brother the entire time, like this latest Fazbear Fright story just confirmed for us, it doesn't make sense. Which is why now we have to solve these last two questions. What do you remember? Do you remember your name? I mean, yeah, I do remember my name. It's Mike. I wrote Mike on the first page of the book, didn't I? Unless Mike never truly was my name. The question that we're left with, and the question I pose to you and that I still need time to think through is, what did Michael forget? And how did he forget it? Was he the bite of 87 victim? Is that how he lost his memory? Did some sort of other trauma cause him memory loss? And more importantly, is there some other strange connection between Michael and the crying child? Like, seriously, why would the book say that the party was for Michael when FNAF 4 clearly tells us that it's not? I can't believe that this is just some sort of typo or something. This book is so precisely engineered to be the linchpin in too many mysteries of this franchise for that to be the case. So could that connection between the two brothers be the reason why Michael's name might somehow be different? All theories for another day, my friends, but at least for now, we're one more confirmed step closer to getting the answers we've been looking for so long. So maybe that's the reason why the story is in fact called Step Closer, because otherwise that title for a story about a kid losing an eye and an arm just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Next time, we tackle Susie and her connections to FNAF 6. In the meantime, remember that Food Theory exists as a channel and you should subscribe to it. Help us cross 1 million subscribers. I know that you guys can help us do it. And if you like what we do over here, then you're gonna love what we do over there too. So
Alright. Thank you for joining me today. I am done for tonight. We will continue tomorrow. Maybe. Hopefully.